The NFL schedule is coming out here. We'll predict the Broncos schedule and tell you why we believe they should open up the season on Monday Night Football, plus the 17 games that you're going to get on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Broncos Country? Welcome into a brand new episode of Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to all the everydayers out there in Broncos Country who make us your first listen of the day every single day. Yes, we're talking to you. Thank you so much for making the show exactly what it is. You can get Locked on Broncos for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast every single day, all year long. So make sure if you haven't done so already, or if you're a new viewer or listener, you hit that subscribe or that follow button so you never miss out on what's going on with your favorite team every single day, all year long. I'm Cody Roark. I cover the Broncos as a reporter in person in Dove Valley every single day for Mile High Sports. Joined alongside, as always, by my good friend, Sayre Bedinger. You can catch his written work daily over there at predominantlyorange.com. Look, there's a lot to go into here, Sayre. Obviously, as we're getting one step closer to the NFL schedule release, we don't know the official date yet, but it is fun to maybe go out there and predict what the schedule may be. I know that there's some systems out there, there's some websites out there that are rewarding fans. Like, hey, if you pick the schedule right, like you're going to win a certain amount of money, you're going to get season tickets, whatever it may be. There's a lot of different things, but there's so many different possibilities that it's almost impossible to project how the schedule is going to be entirely. So we took a little bit of a shot at it. And I tell you what, I think we believe that the Broncos are going to have 3 nationally televised games this year, which, to be honest with you, 3 isn't bad considering, hey, Sean Payton, second year as a head coach, you have a rookie quarterback. 3 seems like a pretty good spot, even though that Denver, they didn't do so well in a lot of the primetime games we saw over the last couple of years, though I think they made a couple of exceptions last season here. So let's start things off here. Let's be a little bold here, opening things off in our prediction here. Sayre, week 1 of the NFL season, my prediction for the Denver Broncos, they open up on the road. Primetime game, Monday Night Football against the New Orleans Saints. Sean Payton going back home. Like, the storylines here, like, this is just a big game in general because of Payton, his history there, what he did and what he meant for New Orleans. And for Denver, they have a young rookie quarterback in Bo Nix heading into hostile territory. Monday Night Football, Denver versus the Saints. That's my week 1 projection.
I like that one too. And I think there's a lot of different avenues you could go down for week 1 for the Broncos. But I think ultimately getting the Broncos in prime time is going to be a priority for the NFL. I really do. And it could be against Russell Wilson. It could be against the New Orleans Saints. It could be a divisional matchup. But ultimately, I like where you settled on here, Cody, because if memory serves me right, I believe Sean Payton opened up his Saints coaching career with a Monday Night Football game. I believe that was the Steve Gleason blocked punt game. I could be wrong about that. I don't remember exactly, but I think I'm on spot there. So somebody in the comments can correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I'll Google it in between segments here, but just a little spurt of the moment thought came to me there. I think that would be such a fun week 1 matchup. It's not, you save the revenge stuff for later in the season, right? I think obviously you want to see that Russell Wilson versus the Broncos matchup, but at the same time, going to New Orleans, Sean Payton's return there, it would be a much more like positive storyline, I guess, so to speak, when it comes to, and it would give your rookie quarterback a chance to, hey, the home crowd is going to have to wait still a little bit to see you. So you're going to go play on the road first. You're going to go to, like you said, a hostile environment against a good defense, a team that, hey, Derek Carr, he's kind of fighting for his starting quarterback life at this point. It feels like there's not been a lot of positive press about him. Plus, Cody, we'd be able to start off the 2024 season with a crossover with Ross Jackson, which that would be amazing there. So I think that would be a really fun way to start the year, and quite frankly, a lot more positive than some of the other routes the NFL could take.
Well, and then Denver can obviously get their home opener week 2 against the Cleveland Browns. Yes, I mean, the Broncos, they hosted the Browns last year. The Browns were in the playoff conversation. Obviously, they were banged up. They had Dorian Thompson-Robinson as their quarterback there. He got banged up against Denver. Then that led to the Joe Flacco run after that. Not in that game specifically, but the Broncos, they beat the Browns last season, and they'll probably face Deshaun Watson this time around, but Bo Nix getting his first career start at home and in front of obviously a raucous crowd at Empire Field at Mile High, which really kind of leads to, okay, you have week 2 and then week 3, back-to-back home games. The Indianapolis Colts, and obviously they're a young franchise quarterback, Anthony Richardson, coming to town as well. I like the fact that you open up week 1 against the Saints, road hostile territory, but you have 2 home games to get your rookie quarterback a little bit settled and acclimated to the crowd in Denver. I mean, to be honest with you, I think that's a good start for Denver, but I mean, their schedule overall, their opponents are going to be tough. I like that 3-game stretch there, but it is going to present some challenges for Denver.
Most definitely. And the way you've laid this out, Cody, I think it would be a pretty favorable stretch for the Broncos, right? I mean, you play 2 home games in a row, you go to Tampa Bay, go to Cincinnati, and then I think playing at home against Atlanta, you talk about those first 6 weeks of the season. Sean historically has not been great in the month of September, right? I think that's one of the areas that he's really struggled historically, getting off to a fast start. We saw last year how badly the Broncos struggled in the month of September, and then kind of creeping into the month of October there. They cannot have a stretch like they did last season, where I can't remember exactly what they started off with. It was 0-3, 0-4, or what it was, but they can't start off as bad as they did last year. They were 1-5, 1-6 to open the season. That cannot happen if this team is going to be getting back into the playoffs. So you can't rely on having a stretch of games like you did last year, where, hey, they did get back up within 1 game of first place behind the eventual Super Bowl champion Chiefs, but getting off to a hot start. Not that the NFL really cares about the Broncos getting off. They're going to schedule it how they want to.
Yeah.
To schedule it what's convenient for them or what works for them. But for the Broncos, yeah, you go on the road to New Orleans. You play a tough Cleveland team, a tough Colts team. That defensive gauntlet there, Cody, for the first portion of the season, that's the toughest part. Not to mention you play against a bunch of really good quarterbacks there. So it's not going to be easy for the Broncos, is it? It's never. You're looking at the schedule and you're thinking, oh man, they just got the perfect draw. I think this is as good as you could ask for, with a few home games sprinkled in with maybe some of your quote unquote easier road game, like the New Orleans game is maybe one of those ones that I would say is favorable to Denver. So I think it's a tough way to start, but the Broncos would have to get off to a hot start to get back into the postseason mix.
Well, you talk about maybe some of the factors in the first 6 weeks. Obviously, the Saints defense, pretty talented. Quarterback wise, Derek Carr obviously has had his way with the Broncos over the course of, his career so far. I mean, extending back to his time with the Raiders. Week 2, the Browns, not sure what the Deshaun Watson factor is going to be. He looked horrible last season, but they have a really good defense. Indianapolis, a young quarterback in Anthony Richardson who demonstrated some flashes last year. Colts have a solid defense. Tampa Bay's got a tough defense as well. But then obviously Baker Mayfield, they just got off of a playoff appearance last year. So they're renovated. Baker is extended. Mike Evans is still there. Like, that's a challenge. And then you go on the road week 5 to take on Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals, who also have a tough defense. And then the Atlanta Falcons, we know, can be tough defensively. The biggest question, Kirk Cousins, what's he going to look like in that uniform? You have tough offensive weapons to go against with Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Darnell Mooney is now part of their team as well, Rondale Moore. So there's a 6-week stretch there where it's like, hey, like, that's actually a pretty tough stretch here for the Denver Broncos. But the schedule gets a little bit tougher for the Broncos. What does it look like when we look at the standpoint of week 7 through week 11? Well, the Broncos going to open up week 7 with an AFC West divisional opponent. We'll dive deep into that here on today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos. This show is brought to us by our sponsor, BetterHelp, and sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off of our chest, whether that's big or small. There are certain things that can really start to get to you, and it's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased on your life, and that's where BetterHelp can come in handy. Now, I've utilized BetterHelp therapy before in the past. One of the things I used them for, I was really struggling with trying to deal with my time management, stress, anxiety, being able to deal with all those and still operate functionally on a day-to-day basis. I didn't have all the tools necessary. So my therapist and myself, we worked on those things. And there's still some things that I use to this day that help me deal with overcoming anxiety, overcoming stress in this world, because life sometimes will throw curveballs at you, and it's okay to not always have the answers, but it is important to know how you can be a better version of yourself every step of the way. And that's where BetterHelp came in handy for me. And therapy can be different for everyone. Most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports team, and it's important to get things off your chest every once in a while. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon.
The mid-season Russell Wilson revenge game will be a major storyline for the Denver Broncos this coming season. Where do we see that happening? Cody and I are going to continue to break down his schedule prediction for the Denver Broncos in this 2024 season, but want to say thank you and give a shout out to all of you everyday listeners of Locked On Broncos, all of you that tune in right here on the Locked On Podcast Network every single day, free and available everywhere that you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, where you can watch the show and engage with other members of Broncos Country. We appreciate every single one of you so much for rocking with us here, especially in the off season. And right now, Cody, we're talking about a schedule prediction. We don't know exactly how things are going to go, but when you look at how the NFL kind of likes to orchestrate storylines and maybe help teams out with, we don't know where the international games are all going to be on the schedule and how that will factor in. But look, I think you've done a great job kind of nailing what the kind of the ideal timing for things are. We went through weeks 1 through 6. Up here, you have week 7, the Denver Broncos facing off against their first AFC West opponent of the season, against the Las Vegas Raiders, who they're the team that got left out of the quarterback prom this offseason, right? They got Gardner Minshew in the building, but they, in terms of the NFL draft, they were left out. This game is going to be huge because the Broncos haven't beaten the Raiders in a really long time. I like the timing here, getting this matchup a little bit earlier in the season than we've kind of gotten used to with the Raiders lately.
Yeah, and who's going to be the quarterback? It's going to be Aiden O'Connell. It's going to be Gardner Minshew. Who's going to be throwing to Devontae Adams and Brock Bowers, who a lot of people in Broncos country really wanted? I mean, the Broncos, they've lost 8 straight games to the Raiders. I mean, ideally at this juncture last season, the Broncos were getting ready to go face a Kansas City Chiefs team, and everyone was wondering, I think this was that Thursday night game, can the Broncos snap the streak on the road? It didn't happen. Well, 2 weeks later, they were able to take care of business at home in Denver. Can they snap the streak on the road against the Raiders and what I have pegged as a 2:05 p.m. Mountain Time kickoff in Vegas? That kind of sets things up for Denver to obviously go on a week 8 road game here as well to take on the Seattle Seahawks. Now, if Russell Wilson was still on the team here, Sayre, this would be a much bigger matchup on paper, but the allure of this matchup probably isn't as strong anymore. And obviously Drew Lock is no longer a member of the Seattle Seahawks as well. So this is just a, hey, non-conference opponent, 2:25 p.m. Mountain Time. And the Broncos hoping to get a big, win on the road here at this point to really kind of make up for that 2022 Monday Night Football debacle that we had all mentioned. But what does week 9 bring to the table here for the Broncos and Broncos country?
Get a little mid-season bye there, right after that gauntlet in the first 8 weeks, which includes only, I might add, only one, it looks like, 11 a.m. Mountain Time kickoff, which, man, that would be huge. The more, I guess, the less 11 a.m. kickoffs the Broncos can get, the better. So those East Coast opponents, hopefully the Broncos get lined up in some maybe some prime time like you have with the Saints there. But I think that's a key factor here. And you get that week 9 bye after playing just one early slate game. That would be huge to begin the season because you're not doing a ton of traveling if the most you're, or at least taxing traveling if the most you're playing is one early window game like that in the season. So I think getting a week 9 bye is kind of ideal. It gives you the opportunity to reset at basically the exact halfway point of the season there. But coming out of that bye, Cody, is what would be fascinating because having a bye in week 9 and playing the Pittsburgh Steelers in week 10 on primetime Thursday Night Football, well, that would give the talking heads a full 10 days to be previewing this Broncos versus Russell Wilson rematch coming up this season, which I think is going to be one of the most intriguing games of the year for any NFL fan, regardless if you're Broncos, if you're Steelers, if you're Seahawks. People are going to be fascinated to see how that one ends up. I like that you have it picked there right after the bye week, especially for the Denver Broncos' sake.
Well, in that game specifically, the storyline kind of writes itself. The quarterback that Sean Payton didn't want versus the quarterback that Sean Payton loved and wanted. Russell Wilson versus Bo Nix. Now, look, obviously, I think on paper, this is the best case scenario for a lot of these games that we're talking about. When we're breaking down our scheduled prediction, this is factoring as if every single team stays healthy and their key players are still in the realm here. Now, obviously, week 10, I mean, there could be a whole different conversation as to what happens. Like injuries could obviously throw a wrench in, the Broncos' plans, could throw a wrench in the opponent's plans. But these are like the best storylines on paper right now. So Russ making his return to the Mile High City, where I think we anticipate that game on Thursday Night Football. If that were to be the case, the environment regardless is going to be raucous and it's going to be a little hostile there. I mean, I was there in that week 1 Monday Night Football opener when Russ went back to Seattle. And I tell you what, I've never heard a stadium so loud. I've never heard boos so loud. And look, Russ played, I think, pretty well in that game. But all circumstances considered, despite how things went in Denver, I imagine that the Broncos fan base, Broncos country is going to be rowdy, rambunctious. And every time that Russell Wilson touches the ball, I guarantee you the fan base is probably going to be counting in the stands on the play clock, just whatever they can to bring that mile high energy, that mile high environment in which we've been accustomed to seeing. Now they got to channel all that towards Russ, which, look, like I said, I want to be very, very clear on the subject matter here. I appreciated Russ's time. Russ was always good to me in the locker room and in terms of talking and whatnot. It wasn't all his fault what happened in Denver, but obviously both sides had split up. Like Russ could have and should have played better in a lot of situations. It didn't work out. It is what it is. But I think the fan base, because of the circumstances, because of how they felt about, hey, we traded a lot of capital to be able to bring in a quarterback to see if he's going to be the guy. It didn't work out. Broncos fans are angry and rightfully so on that. So I think this matchup coming off of, the bye week, Thursday Night Football, ideally, can the NFL find a way as they're looking to entertain 18 regular season games? Can they do it to where maybe both teams are coming off of a bye week here? Can the Steelers and the Broncos have a week 9 bye week and then play each other on Thursday Night Football? I think that's how it should be for teams that are going to be playing on TNF anyways, versus having 2.5 days to recover and then going into 1 day of practice essentially and then going out there and playing. I just hate that for the NFL, for, a league that deems player safety. But that week 10, if this were the case there, week 10, that would be huge here for the Broncos. And then after that, look, they're going to have another home game. Justin Herbert and the Los Angeles Chargers in week 11 coming to the Mile High City. Herbert hasn't had a lot of success on the road at Denver. He struggled there, and the Broncos hope that trend continues. But for here, I think the storyline is, hey, you have two former star Oregon Ducks quarterbacks that are going to be leading the team, their own respective teams in this matchup. And then it's an AFC West divisional matchup. We all know how important it is. Denver has to take care of business in conference play and also divisional play this season if they have any chance or any shot at making the postseason.
They absolutely do, as we saw how important that ended up being this past year with a couple of key losses late in the season against AFC opponents. And so I think this is a great spot for this as well. The Jim Harbaugh, remember the Broncos went to his house in Ann Arbor and recruited him to be their head coach before they ultimately hired Sean Payton. And now the Chargers have him as their head coach. And so I think that's another intriguing wrinkle here as far as the storylines in this game. And Jim Harbaugh's return to the NFL, how's it going to go? How quickly is he going to be able to exercise the demons there in Los Angeles, as far as that team being a consistent choke artist, constantly struggling with injuries, and Justin Herbert, quite frankly, playing and looking a lot better than that whole rest of the team around him. It's kind of a bizarre thing. Like, he's so revered as a quarterback, and yet the Chargers have stunk, and he was hurt last year. So that's going to be a really fascinating couple of matchups when the Broncos play against them. You follow that up, though, by, this is the one. I'm the eternal optimist. I'm the 17-0 until we ain't type of person, going to Baltimore in week 12 of a season after they've had chances to gel for 11 weeks. You can mark that one down as a loss. Whenever the Broncos go to Baltimore, that I'll sit here on this podcast and talk about ways the Broncos can win the matchup. And we'll talk about, hey, this is what they've got to do to win, because that's what we do. But man, when the Broncos go to Baltimore, my mind is going to be preparing for a loss in that game. That's just what happens when you get to Baltimore. It's brutal. So that would be a late season, early window game in Baltimore. The Ravens have one of the best home winning percentages of any franchise since they became a franchise. That's a tough way to end, enter the final stretch of the season.
Well, and that was their second Eastern time zone game, which we know Denver historically is not really good at. But I think ideally so far on this schedule, I feel like Baltimore's probably going to be the toughest opponent to date if we are talking about Denver sitting here at week number 12. And look, another question we're going to throw out here. Broncos country from weeks 13 to the end of the season. How do the Broncos continue the end stretch as what will be a very crucial run for them if they hope to make the playoffs, some conference play, and some storylines that bind? We'll break down the final portion of the Broncos' remaining schedule in our schedule prediction episode here, Locked On Broncos. Today's Locked On Broncos podcast is brought to you by our friends over there at the Game Time app. And Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. And prices on the Game Time app, they actually go down the closer it gets to tip off. So if you're in Denver right now, the Nuggets not doing so well against the Timberwolves, but if they can go on the road here in one of these upcoming 2 games, and if they can find a way to win one of those road games to force a Game 5, you can get tickets to the next Nuggets home game at Ball Arena, hopefully in Game 5. That is the case here. Well, Game Time makes it easier for you to take your friends, your family, your loved ones, or your kids to be able to go to a game. On top of that, you can just go to a concert. You can go to a comedy event. You can go to other things in your areas besides sports, but Game Time is the place to be for the NBA playoffs right now. And the one thing I like about Game Time, obviously, there's seat views where you can see what the vantage point of all the action is going to be for the event you're going to attend. You can see that directly inside of the app with a panoramic view of your seat before you buy. They have the lowest price guarantee, which will allow you to, get up to 110% of the difference if you find prices that are cheaper elsewhere. Game Time, they credit that back to you. So make sure you take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Weeks 13 through 18 paint a picture for the Broncos as they look to make the postseason. Ideally, in a perfect world, those games are going to have critical meaning for them, and hopefully they're in that conversation in the end stretch here. Real quick, want to say thank you so much to everybody in Broncos Country for tuning in and making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. You can get us for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts here. Continuing our NFL schedule prediction here for the Broncos. We left off at week 12 where Denver takes on the Baltimore Ravens, but week 13 through week 18 will set the table for a potential postseason berth for Denver, but it will not come easy. There's going to be a tough test of opponents. So really after that week 12 game, Denver playing the Baltimore Ravens, well, they have a primetime game in week 13 as they travel to Arrowhead Stadium to take on the Kansas City Chiefs. The Broncos, the last time they faced the Chiefs, Denver, Russell Wilson, they helped snap that win streak that Kansas City had over them. Now Bo Nix will be the quarterback. Can Bo Nix help the Broncos extend that win streak against the defending champs? Or, what are we going to see with Kansas City at this juncture of the season? Week 13, primetime action, AFC West divisional play. The stakes get much bigger for the Broncos week 13 through week 18.
Just imagine going to Baltimore in week 12 and following that up with a road trip to Kansas City the very next. I mean, that is tough. I don't care who you are, unless you're the 2021 Cincinnati Bengals rolling through the postseason. I mean, that's a tough stretch right there. I mean, that's an en route to the Super Bowl. If you're telling me the Broncos are playing consecutive road games against Baltimore and Kansas City this year, my gosh, I'm hoping that it's in the playoffs and not in the regular season, because they need to be able to win the games to get to the postseason first. But it is a possibility, as you've outlined here, Cody, and it would be a tough stretch. It would be a great opportunity for Bo Nix to be able to play in the spot against Patrick Mahomes, whether it would be a humbling experience or whether it would be a victory for the Broncos. I think it would be good either way, because he's going to have to face that at some point. This is the king of the division, the Kansas City Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, the mainstays in the AFC Championship game and the Super Bowl. Like, you're going to have to face that at some point. You might as well do it under the bright lights, because why not? And I like that you follow it up with a home game against the Carolina Panthers, a little Super Bowl rematch there. I don't know, Cody, what the Panthers are going to be this year. I don't know what we can expect from them. I expected them to be way better last year than they ended up being, because, Frank Reich hires this coaching staff full of really good coaches from around the league. And you're like, man, if anybody's going to be able to help a rookie quarterback be good, it's got to be this staff. They get fired before the end of the season. Nick Saban is defending Bryce Young during the NFL draft. I mean, my gosh, it was as bad as it could possibly be, if not worse. That team coming to Denver, it's one of those games that, like I said, with Baltimore, you feel like you can pencil that in as a loss. And I think with Carolina coming to Denver late in the season, that's a game that I think you could pencil that in as a victory.
Well, some storylines to follow. Former Broncos DC is Ejiro Evero coming to town. Josie Jewell also coming to town as well. And we'll see how that kind of placates. But then it leads to a week 15 matchup. The Broncos on the road here. AFC West divisional game once again. This is a tough stretch for them when we talk about, divisional games, conference games, road games. They got to go on the road at Los Angeles. Now, luckily for the Broncos, the last time they played in LA was a little bit of a home game for them, and they handled the Chargers pretty well. I mean, Justin Herbert went down in that game with an injury, but I mean, for the second time in the span of 3 weeks, you're going to be playing the Chargers. And then week 16, now the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes, they come to Denver to take on the Broncos at 2:25 p.m. Mountain Time in our schedule prediction here. So for the second time in 3 weeks, the Broncos Chiefs face off, kind of similar to what happened last year in terms of the formatted structure. Week 17, though, Sayre, is a very, very interesting one here. Week 17 and week 18, the Broncos, tough road game on the road, and the Meadowlands, the New York Jets. And look, I kind of outlined it in my story at milehighsports.com. I said, what are the storylines at this point? Is Nathaniel Hackett still the OC for the Jets? Is Robert Saleh still employed at this point? And what is the latest conspiracy theory that we're going to hear from Aaron Rodgers? Find out on the next episode of Dragon Ball Z here in week 17.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I mean, my gosh, the Jets are going to be such a fun team to follow this year with Rodgers hopefully staying healthy and coming back. It's like your favorite sitcom or soap opera or something like that. You're just like, I don't know what the heck's going to happen this season, but I can't wait to see what it is. Like, the Jets are good TV regardless. So I'll be fascinated if they come late in the season, if that game has playoff implications in New York right there. I mean, that's an opportunity at revenge, for the Denver Broncos. And they've continued doing business with the Jets, as we've seen multiple trades here in the last couple of weeks. So there's not bad blood everywhere there, but we know that the Jets don't like Sean Payton. And I'm sure Sean Payton doesn't care much for the Jets at this point either. So I'll be fascinated by that one. And closing out the season at home against the Raiders, once again, what playoff implications can we expect here? Are the Raiders going to be, I hate to say this because coming from a Broncos person, this won't be received well. I kind of wonder if the Raiders will be in position at this point to potentially be selecting first overall in next year's draft, because I do think that team got substantially worse this offseason in a variety of ways. I don't know what's going to happen with it. It seemed like Devontae Adams didn't want to be there at certain points last season. We know that defense has improved, but they were playing with that extra juice after firing Josh McDaniels last season. And you and I touched on that multiple times on this show, that man, they look like they're playing like a team possessed after firing Josh McDaniels, smoking cigars after beating the New York Giants in the locker room, not because they beat the Giants, but because they fired the Wicked Witch of the West. That's no longer the case. Antonio Pierce, is he truly the right? Like, they passed on Jim Harbaugh. They didn't reach out to, as far as we know, Bill Belichick. There's a lot. Mike Vrabel. I don't know where the heck is Mike Vrabel at this year. They chose Antonio Pierce after he did a good job last year. There's no question about it. I just don't know if the Raiders are going to be a team that, with Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew, is that team going to be able to win more than 5 or 6 games this year? That's going to be fascinating to me. They may be in position for a top 3 draft pick at this point of the season.
It's going to make our ultimate AFC West division crossover once we get close to the season a little bit more interesting, because it's going to be obviously ourselves, your boy Q of the Locked On Raiders podcast, Dan, and obviously David over there at the Locked On Chargers, Ryan and Chris of Locked On Chiefs. Like, it's going to be very, very fun to break it all down. And look, Broncos Country, this was us predicting the schedule. Just a little bit of an overview for those of you who are listening or watching the show wherever you get your podcast, what we did in terms of looking at the overall schedule. We'll recap it for you. Week 1 season opener, Monday Night Football against the Saints. Week 2 against the Browns. Week 3 at home against the Colts. And then you have 2 straight road games, week 4 and week 5 at Tampa Bay, at Cincinnati. Week 6, home against Kirk Cousins and the Falcons. And then you have 2 straight road games, week 7 and week 8 at the Raiders, at the Seahawks. You have a week 9 bye, and then you open up the season, the second half stretch at home on Thursday Night Football against the Steelers and Russell Wilson. Week 11 and 12, you're going to be home game against the Chargers, road game against the Ravens. Week 13 on the road, primetime Sunday Night Football at the Kansas City Chiefs. Home in week 14 against the Carolina Panthers. And then you have a tough stretch. Obviously, in your final 4 games, you have 3 AFC West divisional games against the Chargers, the Chiefs, a road game against the Jets, and then a closing out the season against the Raiders. Sayre, we got to end, obviously, this prediction episode of Broncos Country. You can send in your schedule predictions as well. Are the Broncos going to get to 9 wins or more in 2024? Right now, early, where are you at? I know we said we're going to smash the over on 5.5, but do they get to 9 or more?
I'm saying yes. I'm saying they get to 9 or more, and I think that it's going to be a great turnaround year for this team. I think we're going to see them improve offensively. The defensive line is vastly improved, Cody. I think the running game is going to be much more of a true identity of this team as we originally expected it to be under Sean Payton as the head coach. And so with the Broncos getting to that, Bo Nix hopefully providing a little bit more efficient play at the quarterback position. At least we hope he's the starter at this point, right? And we hope the Broncos don't mess around with that. I think that's going to be an improved team, and I think we will see them win at least 9 games this coming year.
Broncos Country, do you agree? Do you disagree? Let us know if you're listening or watching Locked On Broncos, wherever you get your podcasts or available on YouTube. For all you everydayers out there, here's what you can expect on tomorrow's episode of the show. Broncos Country sent in their mailbag questions, and they want to know, why did Sean Payton and George Payton pass on taking a tight end? And was the trade for Zach Wilson a wasted time, or is there a plan in place? We'll answer that and much more on tomorrow's mailbag episode. Locked On Broncos.